So again, thank you very much. We go over David with you.
Oh, great. Well, thanks. Hi, everybody. And happy Passover if you celebrated earlier in the week. Happy Easter if you're about ready to celebrate this weekend. And happy Easter if you celebrate Orthodox next weekend. And importantly, happy Friday to everyone. I hope we've all got something to celebrate. And thanks again for zooming in and making a little bit of your time available for us. You know, when Max first asked me to be part of this, I didn't hesitate. I was excited. I wanted to connect with all of you and hear how you're doing. And I can't actually see your faces right now, but just knowing that you're here and listening is a source of fortification. But when I started to actually sit down to write and think about what I wanted to say, I found it more difficult, really, than I expected. You know, maybe for a couple of reasons. The first is that I really wasn't sure what I could say that would be different than what has already been written. I think I myself have probably written about 50,000 words on this, and I know how much you read and how much you contribute to this discussion yourself, so I wasn't really sure where I could go that maybe you haven't already been. I was also, you know, I wanted to avoid, you know, using cliches or using statements of the obvious or terms that I think have been thrown around quite a bit. And then I guess mostly I was worried about finding the right tone, the right balance. Like all of you, I have moments where I feel pretty optimistic, and I am by nature a pretty positive person. I have other moments where I have more concern and more anxiety. So trying to find the right balance between naivety and pragmatism isn't always easy. And then I really had to think about, you know, which crisis is it that we're talking about? There is obviously a public health crisis ongoing. In some places, it's been upon us for weeks, if not months, and in some others, maybe we're just now experiencing it. There's an ambulance going by my house, even I don't know if you can hear it, ambulance going by my house right now. In fact, I heard yesterday that every 98 seconds in the United Kingdom, someone has died as a result of this virus. And I know with my own colleagues within Omnicom around the world, there are, when I wrote this, at least 60 people that had the virus, and a few people, not that I work with, but people that I know have sadly passed. So it's an obvious and real crisis, but there are other crises underneath. You know, in the face of a lockdown, you see a big increase in domestic violence and child abuse. You see a big increase in worsening of substance abuse. You find adult caregivers find themselves cut off, and that too causes additional problems and crises. And then you look at the charitable sector, the not-for-profit sector. These are two organizations that I happen to be associated with, Mothers to Mother, which operates in Southern Africa and empowers women to help other women fight HIV, and then Shelter, which deals with people who are underhoused or homeless in the UK. They're not in crisis yet, but they are facing enormous challenges, just as the pressure for them to provide more and more attenuated services is increasing. They're facing possibly a donor shortfall and a redirection of philanthropic dollars. And that points to the next crisis, which of course is the financial crisis that's looming. I'm not an economist. I'm not in a position to say whether the recovery, when it comes, will be fast or slow or mixed. But I know this is the biggest challenge we faced economically in 100 years. And it's not hard to anticipate from that other crises, maybe a crisis in international relationships, in democracy itself, in our faith and confidence in leadership. You know, the power that is required to fight a pandemic or to fight a global recession is pretty raw. And it's that power that is required to win is also something that leadership will be very reluctant to surrender when the time comes. And you can already see strains in our political systems. So as a result, I decided writing this, I would not offer any prescriptions. I don't have remedies for everything or really for any of the troubles before us. If I did, I certainly would have shared them before now. And I decided I would avoid predictions. I just don't think we have enough data right now to make valid predictions about where all these various crises, and related as they are, might turn out. So I thought maybe a better way to frame the conversation and hopefully inform some of the conversations from a wonderful set of speakers that you're going to hear from would be just to talk about some possibilities. And by possibilities, I mean opportunities to reconsider where we fit in our businesses, where our businesses fit in society, and what we might do differently if presented a new opportunity. And what I thought I would do is take thoughts mostly from other people. There are a handful of people that I go to when I need inspiration or direction. And these are people I think have been observing the industry or the world for a while. And I took some of their thoughts and then added my own perspective to it. So in some cases, if you like what you hear, it's probably because I drew it from somebody else. If you don't, it's because I've messed up with what they meant. But hopefully it'll be something that lets you think about things a little bit differently. And the first few possibilities that I've drawn come from a man many of you will know, Paul Holmes, industry analyst, a friendly critic at times. He and I have differed on small things in the past, but I find mostly as we've grown older, his observations are pretty spot on and definitely worth showing. So there are a few sharing. So there are a few that he's introduced, and I've maybe gone a step or two further. The first thing Paul's written about recently is this opportunity to restore our trust in journalism, in an objective media. Now, he hopes that society will respond to a future form of journalism in a more positive way, which I share. I hope as media advisors will go a step further. I frankly think we have been too complacent and maybe complicit in allowing the destruction of objective news and professional journalism. We've let way too much misinformation, disinformation, fake news spread, and we've acted as though we have no real responsibility, or it's just the way things are, and that it's really not our place to address it. And I think it is. Francis and I had talked about a symposium later this year with the PRCA and perhaps with ECO to address it. That's been put on hold for understandable reasons, but I do hope it's something that we as a professional community can take seriously as a responsibility to address in 2021. Related to that, Paul has written about is valuing expert knowledge. And I read something not from Paul elsewhere, but if you think about every disaster movie that's ever been written, it starts with a politician, an arrogant, know-it-all politician, ignoring an urgent message from scientists, and then wham, everything is on fire, it's underwater, or it's a barren wasteland. And I think, well, welcome to 2020. This is where we are, and I think it's ironic and maybe even perverse. Our profession is behind the development of the idea of knowledgeable experts to break down complicated messages and help them be easily digested by the public. We helped introduce that idea, and yet we've let experts be reduced to elitist or eggheads or know-it-alls, and we've done that at our own expense, the expense of our industry, and I would argue at the expense of society overall. So I really hope this too will become a priority for us as a professional community to stop ignoring and try to address. We do that partly because we're all in business. And I think another possibility is to make capitalism better. And I can imagine some eye rolls here, because I remember after 2007 or 2008, the crisis then, everybody agreed that we needed to make capitalism work better. It needed to be more sustainable. It needed to be more equitably distributed. And it probably took about 12 to 18 months before we were right back in our over-leveraged, overextended, overcapitalized take on capitalism, and put ourselves in a pretty vulnerable position, kind of waiting for something like this to show us just how fragile our system is or was. And it wasn't really until last year that the Business Roundtable, I think, this is largely a collection of American organizations, decided that we needed to take a different look at business, and they redefined the definition of a corporation and said that not just shareholders, but all the stakeholders needed to be included as an organization, as a company considers its future. And I hope now that enormous sums of money have been given to business, that we'll recognize, we as members of business, our responsibility and our need to be good stewards of that investment. I have some doubts, to be honest, but I hope we'll be proven wrong, and we'll show that capitalism can work in a new and different way once we pull through this immediate crisis. We've also talked a lot about, this is popular with a lot of agencies right now, this idea of corporate and brand purpose. And there are dozens of examples right now of brands and companies showing that they really do care about their community, that they that they exist for an actual purpose beyond just making money. A friend of mine and a colleague at Omnicom, John O'Brien, has written a book about purpose, the power of purpose. I happen to know it's still available on Amazon if you're interested. He says now, literally this week, now is the moment for companies and brands and institutions of all kind to connect with the communities through authentic human acts. And I do think that this is a moment for us to advise our organizations, institutions, and brands on how they can engage in authentic ways, not just publicity-focused ways. By the way, John and I just launched a magazine from Omnicom this week that focuses on this very topic. It's called The One. I'll put a link at the end of the comments, and you can subscribe to it if you like online. But it's out, and it has a lot, I think, of inspirational examples of both leaders and brands thinking about how they connect with their communities in authentic, human, truthful ways. I think the fifth possibility I wanted to talk about was introducing or reigniting our commitment to creativity. There's a woman named Wendy Grossman that I have known for 15, 16 years. Our kids grew up together in London before she moved back with her family to Boston, where she's now an educator at Northeastern and the founder of something called Creative Reframe. And she has written nicely on her own website about the demonstration of creativity, creative output, to be a better conveyor of how we're all feeling, what it means to be human, and how we're reacting to the various crises and stages of crisis that we're in. And she's got some wonderful examples, and these will be obvious to do, from embarrassing TikTok videos or sidewalk art or the operettas in Milan from the balcony. All of these, I think, really speak to where we are right now as humans. And they're a reminder to us as communications practitioners of the need to balance what I think sometimes is an obsession with data and technology with creativity. Even now we're getting lost, I think, in data around infection rates or mortality rates or rates of infection, and they stop to lose meaning. But music, art, stories, these are the ways we can engage people. And I hope this is a wake up for us to return at least part of our view back to creativity. A sixth possibility, I think, arises in form of expanding collaboration. And I have to be honest, when the depth of the crisis first became apparent, I heard lots of agencies, some in my community of holding companies and some smaller startups, arguing that their model was the best model, that there was some advantage to going with a holding company agency or an independent agency or a small private agency. And I found it a little bit depressing. I didn't think this was the moment to look for a competitive advantage. I hoped maybe we would look for ways to collaborate. And then just this week, the PRCA, and maybe Francis will talk about this later, launched a new program. Francis, I'm sorry, this is the only visual I could find. A lot of online resources for agencies, consultancies, and in-house shops to deal with COVID-19. But importantly, access to, I think, 60 experts who have agreed to make their time and their experience available both to agencies and in-house teams to think about whatever challenge they're facing, whether it's a business challenge, a management challenge, a HR challenge, or a communications challenge, available for free. And I think that's a remarkable demonstration of community and shared commitment to future possibilities. I know eventually we'll return back to our mean old competitive ways, and there are good reasons to do that. But I hope we'll sustain this collaborative spirit, because there's still so many issues facing our industry that would be better addressed together than separately. That brings us to maybe closer to our business opportunities rising to the moment. There's a guy I've gotten to know over the last few years named Mark Staus. He is CEO of a group called Proof Analytics, which is a data-driven organization that looks at the best channels of communication in certain circumstances. And when I told him I was giving this address and that the title of the conference was Crisis in the Industry, he pretty quickly objected. He said, I don't think this is a crisis. I think this is an amazing opportunity. And he said, our numbers show that earned channels are surging, particularly those that are anything that's rooted in science and credible fact. Employees say they're relying on their employers for up-to-date COVID news. This is the hour when trust and confidence matter most. So They're someone not directly in our business, but monitoring our data output and comparing us to other channels, who sees this as a moment for us to seize. And then that brings me kind of to my last possibility, and maybe this is a little bit more personal, but hopefully not so personal that you can't find some value in it. And that's, I think, there's a moment for us to find humility. And by that, I mean that this crisis or collection of crises, however you look at it, forces us to recognize that some of the assumptions we made about ourselves and how our businesses operate and where we fit maybe are no longer valid. It's possible they were never as valid as we thought, but it forces us to think about where we've come from and what our assumptions are and what we think about next. And here again, more broadly than our business, I hear people talking about such and such political ideology or an economic system or leadership style, which are being proven right and which are being proven wrong. I don't know that we're in that moment yet. Maybe, but I don't think so. I've recognized, as I've held out, or this crisis has held up a mirror to myself every day, real weaknesses in the way I treat people and the way I communicate, and they're different than I thought I was. I'd like to think I found some strengths too, but overall, I have to accept the fact that assumptions I had about myself yesterday are changing, and they will continue to change as these circumstances evolve, and those assumptions may not be as valid tomorrow. And this point really came home to me more widely, when I was listening to a brand new podcast from a friend in London named Ed Gillespie, who's a sustainability expert. Sorry, that's my humility slide. He and his co-podcaster just launched this week, have started something called The Great Humbling. The podcast is called The Great Humbling, which I think is very well titled, and it emerges from a quote from Milton Friedman, and I think this is something worth saving for future presentations. Only a crisis, real or perceived, produces real change. When that crisis occurs, the actions that are taken depend on the ideas that are lying around, which is kind of profound. So their view is that it's too early to say where this is going, but it's moving so fast that by the time we assess it, it will have already settled into some new set of stories or narratives about what the future should look like. Some of those stories, I think, will sound appealing. I think some of them will sound quite frightening if you hear about the policy proposals that are underway in some places. There will be some who want to return to business as usual as quickly as possible. For others, the genie's already out of the bottle. They have seen that when we want to, we can take care of the homeless. We can applaud healthcare givers as readily as we do football players. That we can redirect our personal attention to our families and our communities in ways that are meaningful for society at large. I don't know that we have to choose between business as usual or recognizing those changes of assumptions, but I do think we have to confront that they could both be real at the same time, and that too takes a certain level of humility. And I guess I'm not sure where I am on time, Maxim, but the last thing I would say is that you can look at this pandemic as a portal. And Andrea Roy in last week's Financial Times said it this way: the pandemic is a portal. We can walk through it with our dead ideas, or we can walk lightly, ready to imagine another world. Now, I don't want to guess what your dead ideas might be, and I told you what some of mine might have been, but I know we all have some dead ideas about where we fit, who we are, and what we're doing as an industry. I also know we have enormous potential to contribute right now as our teams and our clients and our communities struggle to make sense of everything that's happening. And I know we've got even greater potential in the future if we allow ourselves to imagine another world. So with that, I would just encourage us to walk lightly and say thank you. I'm happy to interact with anybody. My best channel, my most easily accessed channel is Twitter. And if you're interested in any of the resources that I've mentioned, I'll put links up on the comments of this. But with that, Max, I think we're going to questions, or I'll follow your direction.
Yeah, David, thank you. Thank you. Really appreciate very nice thoughts. And if you look at your message box, you will see a couple of questions to you. And it's good that we share the questions to everyone, not to David. So each of us, we can follow the questions. There is a question from Andrea from Croatia. That's the first one, 5:35. And then Paul McIntosh from, I can say from Budapest because he lives in Budapest. Madame Passy, it's Minister Passy. Asel from Kazakhstan, from the beautiful city of Almaty. Nadia Naidenova, most probably from Bulgaria. Again, Minister Passy, and then Krishna from India, and Francis. It's just a conclusion, the most insightful PR speaker I've ever known. I do agree with you, Francis. No other opinion. So, please.
There are a few here, Max. Do you want to pick one or two that you think?
No, please go ahead.
Well, I should probably read these before I start trying to answer, but see how well I can think on my feet. If leading MNCs are moving to a purpose-driven citizenship model for organizations and businesses, shouldn't comms and marketing being the same, even leading the charge? Yes. I had a section. Thank you for asking that. That was Paul. I had a section. I thought it might take us off on a tangent where I thought we as an industry need to be a little clearer in our own minds and heads about what purpose it is that we serve. And if you think about, the legal profession, at least in theory, serves justice. That the medical profession serves health. The accounting profession serves validity. I don't know that we would be able to reach a consensus very quickly on what higher purpose we serve. I think it might be empathy, and it might be helping our organizations or clients find actual empathy with their wider communities. But I didn't want to distract us on another debate about how do you define communications or PR or what our purpose is. But I do think that it's a valid question, and we need to think about it both as an industry and then within the organizations that we run that serve that industry. So I think that was good. Somebody asked if there was if there were slides. I hope you saw my slides. If you didn't, I will post them. And I can't hear Max right now.
Sorry, please post it in the group because for one or another reason we didn't have a chance to follow the slides.
Okay.
We've seen a lot of examples like Puerto Rico, for example, retooled its production to boast hand sanitizers. Reckitt Benckiser's donating millions of bars of Dettol soap to the most vulnerable society, at least in India. About 3.5 million, 10 million bars of soap, 3.5 million masks, for example, multiple liters of disinfectants like Lysol and Harpic. So a lot is happening over there. The Taj Mahal Hotel, for example, they've opened their rooms in India. They've opened the whole hotel for doctors who are working close by, who can't go back to their homes or shouldn't go back to their homes, and they can stay in the hotels. So there is a lot that the clients can do and live up to their purpose. So what is that living up to our purpose? So brands are uniquely positioned to make that positive impact on communities during this crisis. So if they stay true to their purpose and work closely with firms, the timing is important, but leadership is even more important. So now is the time to shift away and not just serve needs of interests of stakeholders, but equally pay attention to the larger good of society. So, for example, Bayer is talking about protecting healthcare workers by providing over 200,000 units of masks. They're providing to over 2,000 needy migrant workers and paramedics with food. They're collaborating with the state governments to develop and support both in data analysis and mobile application for self-assessment. So there are a lot of our clients who are doing a lot, and therefore the purpose piece is very important. So these are some of the points which we should be doing, but there are a lot of things we shouldn't be doing. So it would be a terrible PR move, for example, to ignore what's going on in the world and continue pitching our clients as if things were business as usual. the world is going through a lot of pain, and our campaigns that are oblivious to that would be very insensitive. We have to ensure that our clients' link to COVID-19 is legitimate and it's not a marketing speak. Every client also will not have something to pitch right now, and we need to guide our clients accordingly. We can't force fit everything over here. So I think the idea is don't over promote. So I think finally, the plan ahead is important. A large part of our work involves forward thinking and trying to assess where we will be in the weeks and months ahead. Businesses will have to navigate through these tough times, and we are helping clients think through the likely operational and communication challenges. Somehow, some way, we need to push through this turmoil, and when normalcy returns, which I'm hoping it eventually will, communications will have a big say where companies minimize the damage it has caused to them in terms of their business. And therefore, there's an opportunity for agencies eventually to help the C-suite strike the right balance of transparency and optimism. So I'm going to stop here. I think I've done my 10, 12 minutes maximum. Happy to take questions, but I think I'll let Johna and Solly speak before we do that.
Thank you very much, Nitin. There are a couple of questions. You can see them and then answer afterwards. Okay. I would like to follow the rule ladies first and to ask Johna to join us for the opinion. By the way, Johna, you have in advance questions from Andrea from Croatia on the chat side of the room, and a personal thanks to Johna for wearing the same jacket, red color, which she wore in Lisbon when we took a picture together with my red jacket and her red jacket. So we were both of us red, and you remember this in Lisbon. So Johna, please.
Great, thank you so much, Maxim, and thank you for letting me share the red stage with you. It's a favorite color, so always a pleasure. I think this is such a great forum and such an important time right now because, as we're hearing David talk, I think, and Nitin, something that's so important that we as communicators, I think, excel in, but also take for granted is the power of language. And that goes to the core of, talking about social distancing. And Jim McNamara had a great commentary on social distancing that we don't want social distance. We need physical distance to reduce the exposure to the contagion. But during this time, more than ever, maybe, people need social connection because we are social beings and we are social people. And, having all of that being removed from us is creating this kind of depressed mode of everything that we do. Everything is a little bit harder. For the people that I talk to, and probably about 85% of my network, it's a consistent message that if they hear one more time, you should be doing this in your extra time during this crisis, they are about to explode because, there's a misconception and a misappropriation of how we're thinking about time amid a true global crisis. And that is that, while people aren't leaving their home, their time and their demands are being allocated so differently that we need to understand that and be sensitive and empathetic to that. I think that goes back to what David was talking about earlier is, it's really about leadership communication support. And, a lot of times we have leaders who are very analytical or they're very gregarious, and they've lost that connection with their stakeholders. So what are we able to do to help them support that? And I think having those difficult conversations about what physical distance but social connection means in society is really a critical piece because, if their expectation is changing of their employees right now, it's even more difficult because they aren't just employees. They're, always full-time parents, but now they're full-time teachers, they're chefs, they are the full-time cleaner. They are doing all of this in a compressed environment and in a compressed area in many times too of what they're normal to. And without that social connection, to kind of sense check and field test what they're feeling and how they're able to push through this, I think that's what's repressing some of the progress that we can make through this time. And to contradict slightly what David said, of who I have the utmost respect for, but I think, data is fuel for creativity when used in the right way. And when we look at a lot of the news coverage now, which, does bear a bit of the burden of trust and credibility. And I think there are ways for us to be able to support that. But I think there are really important elements that we're talking about now. We're talking about what the model says and what the data says. And it isn't, four talking heads talking about their feeling on something that may or may not apply. And as we put people in position to make decisions, even data can be wrong. We've seen that, right? But we've also seen that if we have the confidence to be able to make smarter and at least educated decisions based on insights that we're driving, it gives all those around us more confidence. And that's the great example from the public healthcare workers, right? They're using the data that they have. And as the data and the data changes, then they're pivoting, they're adjusting. So they're very agile in their approach to things under a very emotional environment in which they're working. And so I think understanding data, using a broad swath of data, and now more than ever, looking at what your information stack looks like. Is your data coming from a single source? How can you diversify the data stack that you're using to give you a broader and a greater scope of information that you're looking at? That's what's going to empower you to be the best and most insightful consultant. When we're looking at, things in a silo, and I think that's the part, is that, when we talk about other crises that we've all managed, nothing is of this magnitude, nothing is of this scale. I'm looking at the faces and looking at the names, and I'm pretty sure no one was around doing PR during the Spanish flu. Could be wrong. Props to you if you are and you've sorted the Zoom, but pretty sure that's not the case. So I think it's important for us to understand we are all in this together. We're all navigating this new normal. We can apply that skill set that we've picked up and we've leveraged along the way. But I think it is a whole new element, and we need to take a step back and both combine good data and good emotion and good counsel so that we come out on the other side of this stronger. And I think that's what will fuel a capitalism, rebirth and strength, because throughout this, the more and the greater depth we are thinking as business people, that's going to make us a better consultant to the leaders, a better consultant to identify what are those, not opportunities in a vulgar way, but opportunities to improve. What are those elements that we consider, there's a big debate around the language about essential and non-essential work, but how can we adapt our own businesses, our own purview, to then take that step back and say, okay, we were able to do this, we were able to make this adjustment. Is that sustainable? Is that an element that makes our business better or worse? And having those difficult conversations to then be able to drive and thrive what a brighter future can look like for all of us. And I think, it's difficult for people to take that step back and say, well, I don't trust data now, or is that so different? And I think it's absolutely imperative. The things that make us uncomfortable and that challenge us now more than ever, when we're in that deep breathing mode, when we have a different network around us, talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors, talk about that environment, and use that as a counsel that you're taking back to your clients. Because if you're only using your network or your kind of circle of influence that we get in our own businesses, that is limiting you. And I would challenge all of you to take advantage of this time to look at who your own spheres of influence are and how you're broadening them, and to really take this opportunity to look at the opinions of things that you don't agree with and do some own personal analysis of why, use that to shore into your beliefs so that you can be a stronger and better counselor. And I contend that data and information, good and bad, is how we strike that balance and how we can push forward and be the better us on the other side of this.
Thank you very much, Miss Arizona. Really appreciate. Thanks a lot. Let's move from Arizona to Cape Town, South Africa, to see our good friend, Solly. What would like to share with us? Solly is also part of the executive committee of the Davos Communications Forum. Solly, please.
Hi, everybody. Amazing. It's very hard to know how I'm going to follow up on those awesome presentations that have just finished. I'm very happy to be here, to be speaking to this community. You know, everyone is talking about the same thing globally. So we're talking about a pandemic that is affecting all of us, but we also have regional differences in how this thing is being battled across the world. So we could have a discussion about how countries, because in a sense, countries and governments are the ones who are controlling much of the conversations about this thing. So the client suddenly has become government. The government communication, especially in a country like South Africa, informs what everybody else has to say. How do you say to government? How do you say to them? But let's look at what other people are doing out there and how we work with them. I think the challenges in South Africa are really, there are huge socio-economic and political expectations on brands to be seen to be playing a big social role during these times. So it's very hard for brands to go out there and talk product or service without being seen to be taking advantage of a really bad situation. And the fact of the matter is that many brands are not able to do so because we are in lockdown, like many countries are, and we can only come out of lockdown when government says it's time to go out, it's safe for everybody to go out of lockdown. So as PR consultants, I think that one of the key roles we can play with our clients is to make them rise the level of their social conscience, as it were. I think that brands that are seen to be there when the world needs them, when society, especially in poor communities where brands don't want to be seen to be just there to take money when everything is going right. I think it's up to us to give advice to our clients in the commercial sector to take advantage of this opportunity to be seen to be doing something, to be lightening the yoke of difficulties, as it were, of the shoulders of its clients who normally come to them when things are right. I think that the brands that have managed to get it right are the ones who've suddenly switched their product offering into PPEs, personal protective equipment and other medical equipment, because that allows them to continue being in the limelight as brands. They continue to be who they are, but they also seem to be there when the world needs them to be there. So I think the role of PR and communication experts during these times has to be twofold. You do not push product and service too strongly because it, in some markets at least, it tends to be seen to be insensitive to be doing that. You have to say, how do we push the community part of the brand? How do we show that this brand is involved? This community has got empathy. This brand is a very responsible corporate player, as it were, where it plays. And we can't do that. You can't speak out of line. In a country like South Africa, it's very difficult because, not because this government clamped down on the communications, but there are expectations that are not written, right? Government says, first of all, the South African government is seen to be doing a very good job in communicating this thing right from the beginning. I think I'd say most people would probably give it 7, 8 out of 10 on the way it has been consistent, regular, and very transparent, and in communicating what is happening, what is the progress, what is the number of people who've been affected, what are we doing about them, what is the number of people who have succumbed to this thing, what is government doing about them, and why are we doing what we're doing. So yesterday, the South African government decided to extend what was originally going to be a 21-day lockdown for a further 14 days till the end of April. So businesses, clients in South Africa have to sit at home. They have to sit at home, and they have to obviously hope to be able to get back to work, because nobody's able to generate income. Or a lot of people, especially in the tourism sector, are not able to generate business. People are not traveling. There are constraints and restrictions on domestic and international travel. So brands cannot be seen to be, while they have to make it clear that it's very hard for them to sit at home and do nothing, they also have to say, but while we're doing nothing, while we're sitting at home, those of us who are able to take care of our employees who are also sitting at home, we are doing so. We're paying them their salaries while they're sitting at home, and we're making sure that taken care of. We're making sure that even those who maybe who might have joined us like a week or two before this thing happened. So it's really about what is a brand doing during this time, and what is government doing. So it's almost like, you know, you have to, one eye has to be kept on what government is doing, which direction government is taking, and the other eye has to be taken on who are your stakeholders. Do brands just speak to we expert communicators? Do we help brands speak better to their shareholders, or to their customers, or to everybody? So everybody is a stakeholder. We live in a world where everybody is a stakeholder. Everybody is watching what brands are doing, how they do it. And it's up to us to sometimes even be able to say no. Sometimes we don't always have to take the messages that brands want to communicate and throw them out there without looking at them, looking at the context. We have to be trolling the media. We have to know what's going on in the community, in the society, in the sector in which that brand operates, and be able to say to the brand. So communicators shouldn't just be purveyors of messages from brands, as it were. They must also be expert advisors. They must, I'm happy that some of my colleagues spoke about the danger of fake news. We have to know what is true and what is not true, so that we're in a better position to say to our clients, this is not true, this is true, this is what's happening, this is what you should be showing. I know that you want to push this product, but if you push that product, this is how it's going to come out there. So it's better to put emphasis on what you're doing during this time when the world needs you to play a more social, to show more social conscience. I think that's what I want to say. I think there'll be more opportunity to discuss all of this as we go further. The aim is really to say context also matters. You know, when you communicate in the USA, in Europe, in Africa, in South Africa, even Africa is a huge, broad piece of land. We tend to think, for those people who've never been to Africa, that this is one homogeneous piece of land with one way of doing things. And for those who know Africa, know Nigeria is a different country, South Africa is a different country, Kenya, Tanzania, Egypt, etc. Those are different countries, and there are local realities, there are local histories. And so in a South African context, where some of you know we've come from a very difficult history of apartheid, there are still issues of legacy issues that we have to take care of. And brands, corporate South Africa has to play and to be seen to be playing a very active role in helping South Africa move away from that painful past into the future. So the expectations are totally different in each context, not just trying to please politicians, but it's also trying to say, we are not here to just take money from the people. We are here also to play a role. When times are really tough, we as brands are going to partner with government and communities around the country. And there are different communities. When you talk about lockdown in South Africa, a lockdown with certain conditions might not work in different areas, because there are places where people don't have enough space to move around, to stay in their own homes. There are places where people live in big homes. They can afford for 21 days, for a whole month, to just stay in their home, in their yacht, or in their big home with many rooms, and move from one room to the other. So how do you say to a brand that operates in a country like that, so with so much diversity, that it cannot have one message fits all? It has to be conscious of the poor people who don't have the luxury to move from the lounge to the dining room, or to the big bedroom to the other lounge upstairs or downstairs, or to the big yard outstairs. How do you speak to those people? And how do you speak to your more affluent clientele sitting out there that might expect a different message, the same message but customized differently for us? So it's a very big challenge to advise brands in a very diverse country, diverse in terms of racial diversity, income disparities, there's poverty, there's wealthy areas in South Africa. It's a very exciting time as well, because all of us, and it's been said before, Gallagher said it earlier, and my two previous colleagues also said it, we live in a new reality, a new normal is being defined right in front of our eyes. how do we navigate this aid? How do we help our brands, our clients navigate and accept that yesterday is gone and it's disappearing in front of our hands? There's going to be a different way to do things in the future. I think there's an awesome role for communicators, experts in communications and PR to play in that role. It's being defined even for us. You know, what we used to do 2, 3, 4, 5 months ago is probably not going to be relevant anymore. It's slowly becoming obsolete in front of our eyes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Soli. Thank you very much. Regards to beautiful Cape Town. Starting with Francis to talk about new challenges and new opportunities in the PR business. I don't think there is a better speaker than Francis on that. Challenges and opportunities. Please.
Thank you, Maxim. And again, let me compliment you on organising this. I mean, I'm not a practitioner. I run the PRCA as the world's largest membership body for PR practitioners, and ECO is the umbrella body for PR practitioners. So let me give my perspective from those roles. I've spent 7 years as ECO chief exec going around the world and saying the industry is growing. It's being driven by the blending of disciplines, by our excellence at digital, by the shift from marketing and advertising towards us, and by CEOs doing corporate reputation, and saying that our key challenges are proving the value of what we do and recruiting and retaining talent at every level. And that speech is going to have to change as we go forward. The current situation, as I see it, from the membership bodies that I talk with, is roughly this: there is a global impact. Whether you're a big agency or a small agency, or whether you're a holding group, and we've seen the holding groups making their comments over the last week or two about shifting spend and cutting back on central costs. And in the UK, we now run a weekly confidence tracker of what our senior members think. And they're broadly positive still, but that is continuing to go down, that level of positivity. And next week, we'll release numbers from PRC MENA and PRC Southeast Asia. And they don't make for great reading either, perfectly honestly. And on the eco front, we will be, we've collated association responses and we're publishing them next week. And they're overwhelmingly negative, with lots of associations saying they doubt they will survive. I say that not to be negative, just to be honest and realistic. I know that differences are there by sector, and I speak with agencies every day, and they tell me the impact is different depending upon their sector, whether they're public affairs and corporate at one end of it, or their entertainment, hospitality at the other. But regardless of their sector, they are or will be soon laying people off, and that is the reality. And we've had numbers on the impact on freelancers, which are horrible, frankly. I think the number last week was in the UK, 60% of freelancers had lost more than half of their income. And I see no sign of that changing. Now, the big challenge for everyone I speak with, whether they are in-house, agency, freelancer, whatever, is cash flow. And I know that governments all over the world are moving to try and address that. But our experience in the UK is that for some, it will be too late, welcome as it is. And for many, the lack of it now is causing concern. And I saw a PR Week US article just published talking about the US market and its flight towards support So this is a global picture. Now, what does that mean from the perspective I see it? I can't see any mega agencies going under. There will still be an Omnicom, there will still be WPP, Edelman will still be the biggest independent agency in the world. But they're all likely to be a little bit smaller. And I can see plenty of small agencies not surviving, whether they don't get through the next 3 months in terms of cash flow, or whether Q3 hits them when all the debts they've incurred and all the temporary measures they put in place don't hold any longer, finally come home to roost. So we should just look the reality in the eye, really. When we emerge from this, we will be a smaller industry employing fewer people. And that will be something that we haven't been able to say for a very long time, and it will impose new realities upon all of us individually and collectively. Having said that, some people will prosper. In the financial crash of a decade and a bit ago, some went to the wall, but plenty of agencies thrived because they proved their value. And there certainly will be a great deal of merger and acquisition activity going forward, smaller agencies banding together, and the groups, I presume, buying from a position of relative strength. Now, Max asked me to talk about challenges and opportunities. The challenges are quite obvious, really. The first one for many will quite straightforwardly be survival. And that is the case not just for PR agencies, but for companies of every type, size and nature all around the world. And we see that every day on the news. The other more bespoke challenges for our sector, of course, will be client retention, dealing with client holidays. The acceleration will continue of moving away from retainer and towards project. And that's pretty clear. And our need to prove value will never be greater than it is in the coming period. And that plays to Johna's strengths and to AMEC's absolute centrality to our industry going forward. I'm also very conscious, both as an employer and as somebody who runs membership bodies, of staff welfare. These are difficult times for lots of our colleagues, particularly the junior ones, who've never experienced anything like this at all. Whether we're talking about their financial worries, their isolation, their burnout, smaller teams being asked to deal with very difficult problems, or their mental health issues. And I think we all have a role in that, and we at the PRC and ECO have tried to make lots of resources available for free to the whole industry to deal with those issues. And then the need for us as employers to continue investing in skills development of our teams. When I started writing my notes for the opportunities, I confess I sighed, because looking at the opportunities at the moment, and like David Gallagher, I go daily basis from optimism, we're all going to be fine, to pessimism and insomnia, that this is horrible. But there are opportunities, I know there are. If I think about them at their most granular, it will prove, if nothing else, the value of digital. We've always said we're brilliant at it. Well, it will prove that, if indeed we are, which I believe we are, but this is our moment to prove it. It will probably accelerate the shift away from big advertising budgets and towards more nimble, flexible PR spend. We've seen that with the death, basically, at the moment of advertising spend on newspapers. We're all going to embrace these new technologies, and maybe in a long-term positive way. I hadn't even heard of Zoom until a couple of weeks ago. I now spend half of my waking life with it, and there are benefits to it. So some of these changes will last and be good. I think we'll all probably reassess the need for our big, expensive premises. and that'll probably be a good thing because we're going to have more people working from home in a constructive way. Gallagher referred to the kind of fraternal community feeling that has been apparent over the last few weeks, and I'd like to endorse that. He mentioned the PR task force, a PRCA task force under Tony Langham of Lansons, a true team of rivals who are helping their rivals to survive and to prosper. And the way that people have come together over the last few weeks over the world is a great thing. Equally, it will force our agencies and their clients to embrace measurement because they're going to have to prove the value of what they do. And it will force associations like my own to make the case for PR as a valuable use of money, more so than ever before. And again, as Nitin referenced about brand reputation, it will reinforce that trend we've seen over years of CEOs investing in corporate reputation and realizing that the most valuable asset is their reputation. There'll be more investment in employee comms, public affairs, corporate communications. And maybe clients will force agencies to stop seeing themselves in that silo of marketing and advertising and PR. They're just going to want better results for their money, and maybe that will be a useful thing for our whole sector. The final things I think it will force are these, and David mentioned them, and we've seen them for years now. The desire of the public for purpose, not just profit, is higher than ever, and it's not going to go away. The focus on valuable journalism rather than fake news and investment in journalism. And some of the journalism I see in the UK at the moment, for example, is great. Some of it, of the continuing political journalism, the gotcha, we found you out element, is appalling. And there's a spotlight being focused on that. And the role of CEOs providing leadership. Now, there was a comment about a belief in collaboration, creativity, authentic engagement, leaders and brands, and how the spotlight is on all of those things. And that's the biggest area of optimism for me, because they all play to our strengths. So my conclusion would be this. This is not a crisis we would have welcomed by any means. Certainly not me, certainly not our members. And for some, it will be disastrous. They will lose their jobs, they will lose their companies. For the majority of us, we will survive, hopefully in decent shape. And for some of us, we will take the opportunities that are on offer to utilize, as Johna said, the power of language, because our fundamentals are still strong, and it's those fundamentals that provide the opportunities that we ought to grasp. So, like many of us, I'm sure, my focus is on surviving, adapting, and then recovering and making the most of the new opportunities that lie ahead of us, because I know one thing is that our industry is flexible, and that will be its strength. Thank you, Maxim.
Thank you very much, Francis. Really appreciate. Next speaker is our good friend Cesare Valli. Cesare, are you online?
Yes, I am. I was
Cesare. Ciao, amigo.
Hi, everyone.
Ciao, everybody. Cesare is a great professional, being maybe at least 20 years with Hill & Knowlton, and also with the largest PR company. 27 with Hill & Knowlton. Oh my gosh.
And more than 30 with WPP.
So please, Cesare, you have the floor.
Thank you for inviting. Very interesting conversation till now. Well, I think that this terrible crisis showed a number of very interesting things. One is that we've seen several organizations not being very effective in communicating. I can mention a number of states I can mention a number of global organizations. I will name one, the WHO. I think all of them, almost all of them, made mistakes in communication, or let me say, not great communication. And this poses a number of questions. One very big question is what kind of messages they should convene, with what timing, and how to be consistent, because we've seen many organizations sending controversial messages at different time with different people of the same organization saying different things. And the result of all of that was a big confusion. People, instead of being told what to try to do, they have been confused. And these have created a major problem. There is another angle, which I believe is fundamentally important, and an opportunity, frankly, for all of our sector, which is the fact that they all have to rethink the way they use communication, and the way to use communication in crisis time. In a panel discussion a few days ago, someone sent a very interesting picture taken in the 1920s of a family, a large family, with all people, including a cat of the family, with a mask. And this was during the Spanish flu. So we already had a similar problem 100 years ago, but clearly we have not learned a lot. Clearly time are completely different, but certainly the lesson was in place. So another consequence of that is the main important consequence for our sector, I do believe, is the fact that all of these organizations have to rethink how to use communication. And I am pretty sure they will understand, if they do not have already understood, how strategic is communication. Is so much strategic that can contain or expand even a pandemic. This is a big opportunity, in my opinion. This tells even how to rethink the vision of these organizations, how to adopt universal, if that is possible, messages, but certainly messages that do not contain a political angle. We've seen in many places the leading prime minister or whomever in every given country and part of the parliament and the political organization giving messages on their own angle and on their own interest. They have not put the, let's say, client central. So this is a fundamental shift, in my opinion, a tremendous opportunity for communication, because clearly we as a sector spend a lot of time in understanding who we talk with and to define which are the best way to communicate and the best narrative. I would even add that another fundamental topic, which I've seen failing in many cases, is the ability to negotiate and to use the communication for negotiation. I give you one example, which is very interesting. In Europe, we have a big discussion in all the countries probably because there are countries that want the Eurobonds, and there are some other countries that do not want the Eurobonds. And there is a going on discussion in a moment in time when, as we have heard and we all know, liquidity is a big problem. We are losing time discussing, and every day a consensus is not reached, and we delay and delay and delay. And this will cause, as we have heard from Francis, a lot of problems, even in our sector, because a lot of companies will not survive. Now, I give you an example. Because of this situation in Italy, it has been sent around a message which says, oh, the Germans do not remember what happened after the Second World War. They forget that 50% of their debt was cancelled because in spite of what happened, all the countries realized that it was important for Germany to rebuild and to be to have a viable economy, and therefore 50% of the debt was cancelled. This was a message that was probably very well taken and understandable in Italy by Italians. But an Italian friend who lived in Germany and has been the chief executive of one of the largest listed, by the way, healthcare company in Germany, phoned me and said, Cesare, that is completely wrong. It's completely wrong. And it is totally ununderstandable in Germany. And he was trying to advise the Italian government on that. And he said, the reason is that, first of all, in Germany, history is not widely studied. Second, even if it was, what happened in the Second World War has been almost totally cancelled. And therefore, this message is totally inconsistent. You can ask a meeting with Angela Merkel and tell her in private rooms these kind of things, but you cannot use this message with the German people. The message you should use with the German people is that if they don't help the economies of the rest of Europe, they will not sell their Mercedes and BMW. And that is a message they will understand and they will consider. That is a very small anecdote, but tells you how many mistakes has been made and continue to be made. Now, clearly, it is not easy to speak with very large audiences, and it's not easy to speak as many stakeholders, but that is an exercise which is absolutely essential. Now, another point, we have discussed earlier on about the fact that many companies are not in the position to communicate with their audiences because they can be seen as trying to leverage the situation on their own interest. But actually, I think there is part of the business which is widely suffering, and there is another part of the business which is actually booming. If you consider, for example, the healthcare system, they are doing good, they are doing well. If you consider the home deliveries, they are booming. The online newspaper are booming. So there is part of the business which is working very well indeed. Amazon is doing a fantastic business at the moment. But even companies who are really hit by this crisis can really communicate with their customers. I give you again another very small example. I had been, as everyone else, cancelled a number of flights since March. And one of these company who canceled me 2 flights back and forth in March was a company that you may not even ever heard about, which is called Blue Air. Blue Air is a small but very well-growing Romanian airline company. This company canceled 2 flights to me and sent me an email apologizing and telling that I could ask for a reimbursement or to be reprotected. But I needed to get in touch with them. So I tried to phone 3 times, 20 minutes waiting first time that I gave up, 35 minutes second times, and 20 minutes third time. And then, of course, I all the time gave up and I said, okay, fine. As usual, I've lost my money. What happened is that the very day I should have taken a flight, they phoned me. And I told them about my 3 calls, and then they apologized, and they said, you may understand what is the pressure we are under. And I said, of course I do. And I really appreciate you calling me. And they resolved the problem. So they again put me on new flights on April. And then, of course, they cancel again. And they send another email with the number to use next time I have to take that flight. So I have been telling this story to so many people in the last few days because it's the only airline who take care of phoning to every customer, and clearly they gain a tremendous reputation doing that. Small example, but again, something that is very effective. As this happened several years ago when I broke a Cartier watch, cutting the field, and my wife forgot the Cartier watch on the loan, and I cutted even the Cartier watch, and I brought it to repair it, and they say, well, we can repair everything, and they give me an estimate, and I said, please repair. They gave me a new one for half of the price. Fantastic opportunity. So there are things that can be done. And even, I was having a conversation this very morning with a client who is absolutely silent at the moment with their customer. And I tried to challenge them not to be silent, but to find ways to engage and maintain a conversation with their customers, because there are ways you can continue to maintain a relation with your customer. Of course, you have to adapt messages. You have to do things that are relevant for your customer. But there are television that made free the broadcast of movies. Swisscom sent me an email yesterday saying in this very situation where everyone is online and you have to use the line to maintain relation with all the people you deal with and you love, we have decided that we will increase the speed of your connection at the maximum level, free of charge. And again, another very small example, but how there are many things that can be done. And but of course, this brings me to the last very relevant point, which is I'm afraid we have not only a health pandemic, a virus pandemic, but we have even a pandemic of messages at the moment. And so another very important topic is how to emerge and how to be relevant to our audiences. And here we have been talking about the importance of creativity, and I would only underline how, especially in this situation, creativity at work may indicate a way, a sensible way, not a self-advantageous way in terms of business, but a positive way to maintain a conversation with your audiences. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cesare. Thank you very much. You're a real professional. Andrea, are you online?
Yeah, thank you. Here I am.
Another voice from the heroic city of Milan.
Thank you, Maxime, and hello to everybody. Thank you for inviting me. It's you know, the word communication. It's a very important moment for us in Italy every year, and this year, of course, the format is very different. Hopefully, next year will be very different again. What can I say? I say that I am not so negative speaking about business in this moment, because never before we have been so close to our clients. Now with our agencies, we are really thinking now, we are facing now the same issues as our clients are doing. We have the same goals in this moment, the same targets that are not only surviving, but we can share with them common strategies to face a dramatic moment like this. And so we are living, we start to live a couple of years ago, a unbelievable changing moment in our profession. Everybody here know better than me. And this moment is an accelerator about this changing. Because in this moment, we have to remember that we are consultants, we are communicators, but first of all, we have to be entrepreneur, because we have to face now deep financial crisis. We have to face a big risk to lose some budget of some clients. We have to remember, as I told before, that as entrepreneur, we have to be strong and to put our heart thinking about next year, because we will not only survive, but after this moment, we will speed up our growing and our power on the market. Of course, the risk to lose client is a big risk, because of course, in a moment like this, our clients probably are much more attracted from some tactical activity. They will invest money much more in advertising, for example. But on the other side, I think that you have to know that in Italy, every different kind of job has a different code. Public relation has a different code than, for example, advertising or a media center and so on. 2-3 weeks ago, our government declared that only few activity has to be considered strategic, and so only few activity could be allowed to work in this dramatic moment. PR are included in this list, and PR is the only code of the communication world that is included in this strategical list. This is a very, very strong signal, because we know that we are strategic, but we know now that even our government and our client know that they can suspend their activity with advertising. They can stop their activity in some other corner of the communication world, but they cannot stop to think about strategy, about relationship, and first of all, about their reputation and positioning in the market. This is the main reason why I think that we have to be very strong in this moment, in these months, because then for us will be very different than before, because we are moving our positioning in the perception of our client. And never done before, now we are consultant. We are consultant and no more service provider, like unfortunately often happened in the past. Of course, the world after this pandemic will be no more the same. And our clients, we have to teach to our clients that in this moment and then after this moment, they have to focus their investment in reputation and positioning in the market. And this is PR. Again, people need to perceive, to work with brands that they perceive as true, as transparent, as sustainable. And this is our job. This is exactly our job. So again, I am worrying, I am scared. This pandemic in our country, in all Europe, all the world is dramatic. But I want to be positive, thinking about the future. Thank you.
Grazie mille, Andrea. Thank you very much. I would say even just making a remark on your speech, we are not only consultants these days, we are more than ever decision makers, because sometimes, especially in the period of crisis and during the crisis management, even our clients don't have time to consult with us or to ask for advices. We should take decisions and fast and immediately. So I'm trying to find the last speaker in this panel, Sergey Zverev, from, I don't think very cold Moscow, but beautiful Moscow. Sergey, are you online?
Yeah, thank you very much. I tried to. Nice, yeah, nice to see you, to see all of us, and nice to see you, Max.
Thank you very much for joining us. You have the floor.
Thank you. It's quite difficult to continue after such deep, free comments of my colleague. And you know, I try to measure myself, or I'm optimist or I'm pessimist, and I think only one position which I can choose to be somewhere in the middle. No, I'm totally agree with Cesare. After this crisis, we are and all societies should find and give answer for many questions. And one of this is quite simple. How communication is important for us as a humans and us as a human society, and is communication important or not? You know, for the second question, it's look like the answer is quite simple. Yeah, we are very important from one hand. From another hand, totally agree with Andrea. It's very strange. We not only in Europe, in Russia we have exactly the same situation when government decided which economic sector is strategic, which economic sector needs to be helped. Now we can find a lot of different spheres, but we will not find communications. Why? From one hand, this crisis showed to us that information is very important, and Cesare, he gave us absolutely clear pictures how many mistakes and how many mistakes we did during this crisis, and how important was to be more understandable, to be more clear, to make how it's possible to protect for the fake news, how to be more closer to people. from one hand. From another hand, you know, this crisis is it's a great opportunity, because what we are doing now, we have conference which we organize by Zoom, and if you remember, several days ago, the number of conference identificator had 8 figures, after 9 figures. Now it's already 10 figures. It shows just only one picture. Every day, at this moment, every second, we have around the world, we have thousands and probably millions of such conferences, which show that people do not be able to survive without communications, and communications is part of our life. And from both of these angles, absolutely clear, communication is strategic sphere. But another good question: what is we as a consultants? I don't know, for me myself and for my company, it's quite important, quite important issue. Francis talk about this. What we should do, what kind of advice we should give to our clients. To keep silent, because some of them wants to reduce expenses. Some of them try to make some, even if they do anything in the social responsibility sphere, they try to keep low profile of them. And we have, as a consultants, we should give them advice. What is the best strategy now? To be open, to communicate with people as much as possible, or try to be not so loud. Especially because especially because we understand absolutely clear. Next step, economic crisis, will push our clients to reduce budget. I don't know what happened in around the world, but in Russia, the first budget point which usually our client try to reduce is PR. Second is maybe is advertising, and the third one is how many piece of paper they should buy for their day-to-day activity. And yeah, for us it's a quite huge question. What we have to say them. From my point of view, even today, we should explain to our client that there's no, there is no the unique answer for everybody, common answer for everybody. We should measure all arguments and give them we should give them advice which is as professional as possible, but they should understand communications. It's not issue which we use only in the good time. Communication is very important when society, when their enterprises, their employers in crisis. It's a very important. It's a very important. We I agree with Francis. First task which we have is how to survive. First of all, how to survive. Second point is quite clear. We should be ready for changes. We should be ready for new situation in technology sphere. We should be ready with new budgets, and we should be ready to give answers and to be ready to understand all factors which we can to learn in this situation. From my point of view, another point which is quite could be important. It's a combination between online and offline. We were talking a lot about digital sphere. We were talking a lot about the digitalization digitalization of our life. But what we have now, we have a lot of challenges in social networks. We have a lot of flash mobs. We can see our clients, our brands in different social networks every second. But I don't know what is in your case, but in our case, we hear a lot. Online is very important, but we need to return. We need to return to offline. We need to be close to each other, not only in the social networks, but we have to be on street. We have to be. We have to organize some events, etc., etc. Because the real information, the real information born not in digital sphere, it's born in the real life. And I think that one of the conclusions which we would have after this crisis, it's a new combination between offline and online activity in communication as well. I don't know. It's a good question. It's very nice that third panel will be about education, because for everybody who involved the education process, who meet with students today, it's very difficult to give answer what you will do in a couple of months, what the situation will be in communication sphere as a business. Will you find job, or you should think about something else? And it's a huge opportunity and huge challenge for everybody. Thank you again for Maxim, and good health for everybody.
Спасибо большое, Sergey. Thank you very much. What Sergey was talking about education right now was a very, very good entrance to the next topic. And the next topic is dedicated exactly on the education. Francis Ingham mentioned that he didn't know Zoom just a month ago. Me either. And the majority of, sometimes our clients were asking us to go on Zoom, and we were saying, no, rather call on the phone or Skype. It's much more reliable. So all those situations and the lockdowns will change also the education, because without the proper education, we cannot move ahead at all. So we have Jon-Hans Coetzer, who is a member of the executive committee as well of the Davos Forum. We have Stuart Bruce from the Leeds University and Jacqueline Zverev from the US. So let's start with Jon-Hans. Jon-Hans, good evening, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Max. And ladies and gentlemen, please let me just again warmly appreciate on behalf of the Davos World Communication Forum Association, thank you for joining us today and engaging in a really valuable discussion about so many of the challenges that we are facing. And the issue that I would like to talk about, if we saw the way that it was framed, it looks at online education as a breakthrough in modern communication. And I actually want to challenge all of us to say, really? Breakthrough? What breakthrough? If we look at the young generation that we are educating today, they are miles ahead in mastering social media tools and social media platforms, where, as Max mentioned, and Francis, that you know, so many of us are sort of very clumsily starting to master Zoom and all these different technologies. So how can we, in terms of delivering education, how can we amplify the value? But also what I want to say is, we don't have the luxury to ask that question. Those of us that are in higher education, education full stop, we have a fundamental responsibility to really step up during this period and see, how do we deliver an education that can really deliver? And I would like to focus on top 10 skills that was revisited by the World Economic Forum, and they list these questions or these skills. They talk about complex problem solving, they talk about critical thinking, they talk about creativity not in the sense of being artistic, but the ability as communicators, an example, to take chaos and abstract situations, and how can we then are able to frame and articulate really workable solutions. People management. The last one is the service orientation, negotiation, and cognitive flexibility. Now, we have seen that a lot of institutions, educational institutions, universities, were forced to send their students home globally, and we've seen a transfer of learning online. The question that I ask myself, and I base it on my own experience of delivering courses online, the challenge is not so much transferring the learning online, but how do we actually engage with the student to make sure that they can continue the learning uninterrupted? And how do we get the educational system to move from highly specialized areas of what the curriculum dictates, such as subject knowledge and understanding, critical thinking, analysis, evaluation, and then the application of that knowledge to actually integrate these complex 10 skills? Because we do live in a world where chaos, crises like this are simply going to become the norm. So for us to say, we are going to have opportunities, and yes, communication is a powerful means, I would like to reframe that and say, it needs to be the DNA of every single thing that we do. Be we communicators, public relations experts, educators, we all have a responsibility, because there is nothing more powerful than education, public relations, or communication. We are actually very fortunate because we have these tools in our hands. And how can we as a global community now use that opportunity? And this is where I would like to link to Francis, what he said earlier, because let us not be innocent and think we are going to go through this crisis and then it's going to be business as usual. No, we will all have to validate the costs that we incur to companies, to organizations, and that's going to be based on measurable outcomes that we can show. It's not about those niceties and the nice to have. It's going to be about the business fundamentals. But where we can help to shift the paradigm is to look at, and yeah, I link education as well, is how can we prepare the leaders of tomorrow, not just the elite? Because, and this is where Solly spoke a little bit in terms of attuned leadership. How can we embrace this notion of attuned leadership where we can show that we are engaged in changing, and sometimes we will have to challenge the narrative of only engaging in terms of shareholder value and producing for the business? Because we've seen today, and in the, I think the outcome of this is we are going to live in a different reality, and education has not the choice, because they will have to, like Francis was saying, the costs of simply focusing on research track type education, there is a market for it. We definitely need it. But is that the only model of education? Is there not also now the opportunity to really see, because there's going to be not maybe the 10 or the 5% of the elite that would like to pursue educational careers in terms of chasing after a PhD or become a doctor or a lawyer, but about the vast majority of the people that need specific skills that we would be able to answer the needs and the demands of industry based on those skill sets about this new world that we're going to be embracing. And that's a little bit that I wanted to throw out there and to say, I look forward to the discussion, and I look forward to some of the opinions from and contributions from my fellow panelists. But just before I go, just to say, Max, my hat off to you, because we have been, you know, there's so much noise out there of different webinars and different, but my friend, you've done a brilliant job in making sure that this discussion and this exchange has real value. And I want to say, I honor you. Thank you.
Obrigado, amigo. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jon-Hans. We have 2 more speakers and 85 people online, so I would like to ask you for your patience. Stay until the end of this amazing panel, amazing summit, just because at the end, we have the president of PR Council, Kim Sample, a great professional who will make the wrap up. And I hope that together with Kim and Francis and David and all the friends, ECO, PRSCA, PR Council, we can sit down and follow Cesare's advice to create a manifesto for the public relations business in a way that we will distribute it among the clients and among the students. So our next speaker will be Stuart. Bruce. Are you online?
I am, and hopefully you can hear me.
Hello,
yes.
Leeds. Hello, Leeds. Beautiful city of Leeds.
Yes, I have a wonderful picture of Leeds Civic Hall behind me. So like many others, I've been mastering the art of Zoom and have now worked out how to do virtual backgrounds.
Jon-Hans, have you been to Leeds, Jon-Hans?
You have, excellent. Well, if any of the other people on at this wonderful conference happen to come to Leeds, then please let me know and I shall endeavour to show you the best parts, but there are lots of them. I wanted to kind of start by echoing what some people have already said. Yesterday, when I was looking at the agenda for this conference and I saw how long it was and the fact that it was on a bank holiday Friday, and I'm sitting in my garden room office looking out into the sunshine, I was dreading it because I was thinking, I really don't want to spend my afternoon sitting in this summit. And I couldn't have been more wrong. I've heard some really, really fascinating contributions, and I've been busily typing notes, and my brain is really buzzing with some of the ideas and opportunities that I've heard. And it's quite hard to kind of know what the best contribution is to kind of follow on from what people have already said. So I think, well, one of the kind of first points I wanted to make was the one about noise that's just been made, because there is a lot of noise at the moment. There are kind of webinars and conferences springing up all over the place. And all of a sudden, everybody's reinventing themselves as a remote speaking, a remote teaching, a remote learning expert. And let's face it, we all aren't. These are new skills. I mean, I've been delivering kind of online training and kind of remote workshops since 2011. And I would hesitate to call myself an expert at it. And I think we've all got to be kind of patient with each other. But before I start, I just wanted to kind of pay tribute to another aspect of learning that we're all having in all of our countries, wherever we are in the world. And that's teachers, the teachers that are teaching our children in schools. You know, now that the schools are closed, it's amazing how quickly that primary school teachers, high school teachers have been able to adapt and to provide curriculums for children to learn at home. And certainly my 12-year-old daughter is loving it. She's really motivated to learn on her own. And I think that motivated to learn on her own is something, a positive that could come out of this. I can actually see this motivation and love of learning actually continuing in life. And I think that's really important, because the main focus of what I wanted to talk about now was our lifelong learning opportunities and continuous professional development. Because about half the work I do is training, and then I do lecturing at Leeds Beckett University, and I'm a consultant. And lots of people have said to me, oh, there must be this massive demand for people wanting to do online learning, because you've got all these people sitting at home with nothing else to do. They've got time to invest in their careers and continuous professional development. That could not be further from the truth, because most communications people I know, most PR professionals I know, they are so busy firefighting, they are so busy helping their clients to deal with what's happening on the front line. So whether or not it's a PR person in a supermarket or a food manufacturer or the health service or the police force, they're all just so busy, you know, trying to make their organizations work, trying to make it successful. And you're also seeing PR and communications people changing their focus and changing their emphasis. So you've got people who have historically always been doing external communications, and their focus has very much been on traditional things like media relations, or maybe in digital and social media. And they're suddenly realizing that actually one of the most important stakeholder groups that they need to communicate with is employees. And they're shifting their skills of being able to tell stories, being able to craft messaging, and they're focusing them on that new audience. And that's really exciting to see how people are beginning to understand what transferable skills they've got. Moving on, one of the things I wanted to get us all thinking about is what are the learnings and the opportunities that are going to come out of the situation we face ourselves in now. And Francis actually stole some of my thunder, because when he went through what some of the opportunities were, one of the things I'd done earlier was to have a look at the ECO Global Report, where they were they were doing a survey of PR and communications people around the world, and looking at what some of the key skills were that people thought they were going to need over the next decade. And it's quite interesting if we take a look at the results of that research. A lot of it ties in with what Francis was talking about. Right up there at the top, we've got research, insight, and planning on 44% of people identifying that as a relevant future skill set. And immediately below that, on 42%, we've got data measurement and analytics. And it was quite interesting that one or two people have mentioned measurement. And the focus has always been on proving our worth. And I would agree to some extent. That is one of the things that we can do with measurement. But actually, if that's the only way you're using measurement, if that's the only way PR and communications people are using it, then they're missing out on some of the biggest opportunities. Actually, the focus should be on using measurement for insight, to actually do the right things, to understand stakeholders. And then the second part of how you should be using measurement is iteration, to actually improve what it is you do. Because if you focus on those two parts, the actual proving our worth at the end is going to be so much better, because we'll have actually been more successful. And I do think that this is a great opportunity for PR and communications people to upskill themselves and to actually start putting a lot more emphasis on measurement. And I think probably the biggest strength that we have out of this is if you actually look at what the barriers are to client organizations and agencies adopting better measurement, one of them is they don't want to invest in it. They don't actually see the value in it. I think if we play this right, we can actually use it as an opportunity to get people to invest. But the flip side of that being, we actually need people to have the skills to be able to do that. It's no good convincing people, the world, that communication and public relations measurement is really important if we don't have the people there to do it. And Johna can probably come in and say, but I can do a wonderful kind of certificate where you can actually learn and actually get the skills that you need to do it. I'm not sure when the next enrollment is, but maybe she can pop it in the chat and let people know. And I've got to do a quick disclaimer. I do some of the webinars for that, but it's not about plugging that. It's because it is actually a fantastic. And some of the others that are going to come out of that, some of the other areas where I think we need to be learning and putting more is on the digital that Francis talked about. A lot of the time, I don't think you'd see a PR company in the world or an in-house team in the world that wouldn't claim that as a core skill. It doesn't necessarily mean it is a core skill. And I think it's going to be, and you can see it now. I was just before I came onto this conference, I was having a conversation with a very senior public sector PR person, because they'd been looking at some of the communication that police forces in the UK have been doing, and how some of it has been probably misfired or misguided is probably the best way to describe it. And they've been putting out very confusing messaging, which actually backfires. And but it shows why it's so important that PR and communications people have a role in this. One of the other kind of points that kind of was raised earlier that I also wanted to raise is another opportunity that I see coming out of this is that ability transcends geography. Because we're all now working from home, because we're now all working remotely, and a lot of people, I see some amazing work being done by PR professionals around the world. It's working. So when Francis talked about kind of slimming down expensive head offices and premises, etc., I think he's absolutely right. But it's also going to distribute talent around the world. And I think some people are going to get a rude awakening, because I do a lot of work in markets like India, Malaysia, Ukraine. And in some of these markets, there are some amazing, fantastic, talented public relations people. And I think too often we have a perception in the US and Western Europe that we have a monopoly on truth and a monopoly on talent, and it simply isn't true. And I think the kind of global revolution, kind of change that we're going through at the moment is going to unlock some of that talent that we see in markets around the world. Where do I see some of the other education and learning opportunities for PR and communications? I think it's in another one of the points that Francis made, where he made a reference to stepping outside the silo of marketing. And I think too often public relations people do allow themselves to be trapped as a marketing communication discipline, when actually we are so much more. And when we heard earlier from Andrea about how out of the key occupations in Italy, public relations is one of them, that's because of the unique skill sets, the unique contributions we can make to organizations in terms of providing public information, in the terms of dealing with truth, dealing with facts, dealing with ethics, all of the really important core disciplines of public relations. And it is how we do differ from marketing communications. And if we kind of go full circle and go back to how I started and talking about measurement, I think that's one of the opportunities, and it kind of came out in the chat, of where I see our industry needing to develop is AMEC has done some amazing work doing things like the integrated evaluation framework and the M3, so you can have the measurement maturity mapper, and now the new planning guide. And a lot of that is communication focused, and it is brilliant. I think we need to build on some of that expertise and knowledge to look more at relationships and reputation and some of the other things that we're talking about as being really important for, you know, if we're no longer just focusing on shareholders, as the Business Roundtable has said, we need to get better at thinking about how we measure some of those other stakeholder relationships. And it kind of sits there. As I can see people, Johanna and Francis are both kind of laughing here. But yeah, I think we need to get better at doing that. And yet there's been some interesting work done on kind of integrated reporting and the work with Professor Mervyn King, etc. But that's another opportunity I see for our sector, but it requires us to upskill and to learn.
Thank you, Stu. Jon-Hans, do you want to add something?
Only to say I fully agree is in terms of how we can become better and finding those instruments and the measurements that will provide the evidence for us to be able to deliver and to show proof of exactly these complex issues that we are talking about. Brilliant contribution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Jackie, it's your turn, please.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for giving me the opportunity to join you and meet my new colleagues. I really want to thank Ganesh in India, who suggested me for this, who I met several years ago. And I'm very humbled by being part of this forum and grateful that I have the opportunity to speak with you. I come to you from New York. So we're living a very hard world, as many of you are. And I'm a very, very proud New Yorker and really happy to represent this part of the world today. I come to education not as my background. I spent 30 years in corporate America in large, complex global organizations. And I was a CCO, CMO of 3 global publicly traded companies. And as a result of that, I've lived very significant crisis and have hard-won experience as a result of that. And it is those experiences that have actually informed how I teach. I feel very privileged to teach at New York University, NYU, and Columbia at the graduate level, and teach in 3 different programs, one in marketing, one in PR, and one focused really on human behavior at Columbia. I teach 9 different classes in 3 different programs, and I've learned a lot. And teaching has really afforded me an opportunity to be a lot more reflective than perhaps I was during my corporate career. And those reflections have actually been exhibited in what I teach and how I teach it. And never has those experiences and that pragmatism that I bring been more important than it is now. In fact, what I found when we went remote, and my doctoral studies were largely remote, so I was used to being a student in the remote classroom, but I was never a teacher in the remote classroom, so that was really a difference for me. I started writing early on about, I started publishing articles about what it's like to meet remotely with the American Marketing Association. Then I wrote an article about teaching remotely, which got shared. And then I started talking about some of my work that I did about being a virtual leader and how you have to lead differently in this context. And then my most recent thinking really relates to the kind of the message that I want to share with you, which is balancing truth and hope. And I think that is largely what I'm hearing from so many of you in different ways. My friend and colleague, David Gallagher, who I had the opportunity to work with early years ago and have a tremendous regard for, really articulated a lot of the philosophical things that I think are important to focus on. But my thoughts are really around truth and hope. Because I have learned in very large-scale crises, when organizations were going through tremendous transformation and not necessarily in a positive way, what needed to be conveyed to the organization. And the organization needed to understand that there was still a reason to believe. And I think that is one of the things that I'm really trying very, very hard to convey to my students. In fact, I've reflected on my content of late and changed a lot of my lectures from now until the end of the semester, along with their work, to really connect with what we are living in. Because it's not just about remote teaching, it's about remote teaching in this. And I have so many students in New York who were all remote, who are from all over the world. I mean, NYU has perhaps one of the most global classrooms ever in terms of who comes to us and where they come to us from. And many of our students are in isolation, thousands of miles from their families. And my role as a professor has become a different one in some ways, because I am a person that many have sought out in moments of loneliness, isolation, fear, concern, in addition to the learning environment. And that's an unexpected role, and a role that I feel privileged that I can actually be part of. I have students who have suffered cancer and dealing with it remotely. I have students who have had families that were in China that when they came to us at the beginning of the semester were dealing with their families being in isolation and living in isolation because of that situation and then being here. And it's really giving me a whole different regard for how we actually think about the roles that we're in as faculty members. So I think that one of the I'm sorry, we're getting an emergency call here. I think one of the really important wireless caller. I'm sorry about that. We get a lot of emergency calls here in New York. One of the important roles that I have taken in this process is to really step up in terms of how I navigate my classroom and share the learnings that I've had throughout my corporate career and how that really translates to this situation and how they can learn from it. I think that one of the things that is really an imperative here is that as we think about, as PR practitioners and marketers or whatever skill sets we bring to this conversation, that we also discuss the importance of storytelling. And that's what really links to the concept of truth and hope. And we need to find ways to celebrate the kindness, the goodness, and the important victories that we have in the wake of this crisis, and teach our students and teach our colleagues and connect that with the content that we're advancing and the way that we're engaging others. And I would say that is one of the most important aspects of how we can actually move more positively from this into our next world. And I'm so sorry about this. And that we look at how we convey that to students in terms of the learning and how we kind of connect that to a larger world beyond this crisis. None of us has a crystal ball in terms of what will go next, but I believe that the concept of connecting the classroom, whether it's remote or in person, with the concept of truth and hope will probably be the most lasting one. I will tell you that one of the things that I did in this process, I'm on the board of a nonprofit and arts organization, and like many are suffering significant financial implications from this, especially here in New York. And I engaged 2 of my classes, both in marketing and PR, to actually get involved with them in a very positive way. And it's been a very fortunate experience to have them engaged, working and contributing. That's actually a welcome distraction from the drudgery and the loneliness of not being able to go outside and not being able to connect normally under normal circumstances. And it has been a really great way for me to get to know my students in a different way, mentor them in a work product, and actually engage and convey some of the things that I've learned in my career. So I thank you for allowing me to contribute to this conversation, and best wishes to everyone.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Thank you very much. All we know that the call you had was from the White House, so you can take it later on. And
thanks for giving me a laugh over here.
Just answer the questions from the president, Before I give the floor to Kim Sempo, the president of PR Council, I would like to ask Minister Solomon Paci, who is the former chairman of the Security Council of the United Nations, to share opinion how the public relations business and public relations discussion looks like from the point of view of a politician, Minister Paci.
Thank you very much, Max. I'm thrilled to be in such a great company of PR experts. I myself am not a PR expert. My background is computer sciences and mathematics. Then I switched to government and politics. And now I'm back in think tank and consultancy. And we do not make PR. Our business is, so to say, to offer solutions. And that's why we received a request from the European Commission a few weeks ago. And they asked us, tell us what to do during this crisis. We're collecting opinions from all over Europe. Our answer was very simple. We cannot tell you what to do right now because it is too late and there are too many voices who are telling what to do. But we can tell you what to do in order not to repeat this situation. Actually, this situation was avoidable. And this is something that we have to recognize. This virus, the Ebola virus, the bird flu virus, the swine flu virus, etc., 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 all of them were result of animal to human transmission of viruses, which is linked to bad food practices and poor sanitary conditions. If we decide to stop the problem at the place of origin, this will give us the perfect way to prevent the next or to minimize the risk for the next crisis to occur. So this is what we gathered several European leaders from different countries across Europe, and the leaders also of international organizations like the European Union, NATO, etc., etc. And we offered an action plan for which we call it Health Shield Europe, which we intend to develop as Health Shield World. And I sent during listening to this so impressive speakers, I chatted a little bit and I sent you links to this. You can find it also on the website of the Atlantic Club of Bulgaria, atlantic-club.org, member of whose board is Maxim. This is a solution which we believe might minimize all the risks on the one side, and on the other side could offer unified answer to such crises when they appear, when they occur. Sometimes they would be unavoidable, but we are dealing in a very, very messy way. I'll give you simple examples. For example, you have in the Netherlands, they do not have quarantine. In Belgium, they have quarantine. And in the same time, the movement between Netherlands and Belgium is absolutely free. So the quarantine in Belgium becomes absolutely useless. So we are suggesting a set of policies, to start with policies within the European Union, but then to be extended for world politics, world priority, and potentially to be put under the 17 sustainable goals of the United Nations. And this is really something on what I believe we should focus nowadays. Exactly in the same way, like during the Second World War, in the middle of the war, the new world order was created by the founding fathers of the future European Union, NATO, and etc., international and global organizations. So to answer to the question of Sergey, he says what to advise your clients. I would say, I would advise everybody, and your clients in particular, let us focus on preventing the next crisis and let us adopt the measures now, because humanity is something very reactive. It is not proactive. And we can take difficult measures, difficult solutions, imaginative solutions only in times of crisis. And now the times of crisis is the time to act. And having this solution, which I sent you, I'll be very happy to rely on your PR expertise to advertise it worldwide in order to prevent the next crisis.
Minister Pasi, I have a quick question to you, and this is following. You are the only politician in this discussion, and from a certain point of view, you're also a public relations person following your career throughout the years. What is your judgment of the reaction of the European Union leadership these days for the past 1 month?
This is a known situation, so we cannot blame nobody for being unable to react in unknown situation. It was like 9/11.
No, it's not the blame. It's not the blame. Just your opinion.
Yeah. I remember in the 90s, I attended a number of meetings in Washington where political prophets were telling us what is the terrible potential of Al-Qaeda. No one was listening to them. When 9/11 happened, everybody said, oh, why we didn't listen to these guys? So the leaders of the European Union, as the leaders of any country, are elected people. And they want to please the public opinion. This is the biggest deficiency of democracy, to please the public opinion and not to lead it. And therefore, we need, as European Union, and after that, we as United Nations, we need a coherent, we need synchronized, uniform politics on how to address to prevent such crises, and after that, how to address them in a uniform way.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Best wishes to your initiative, and I hope that the leadership of the European Union will accept it. So we are close to the end. Now I would like to give the floor to Kim Semple. Kim, thank you very much for your patience. And from the bottom of my heart, thanks for joining us in the last moment. You have the floor.
Oh, thank you so much. I feel this unbelievable amount of pressure to try to sum up all of the amazing insights you all have shared. It's such an honor to be here with this group and learning from all of you. I head up the public relations, the PR Council in the US. We are an association representing about 110 member agencies, from the largest agencies in the world to some of the smallest, perhaps. I am, like Jacqueline, in New York, and definitely feeling very heavy with all that is going on, but so many of you are experiencing much the same thing. I think that there's never been a moment where there's been a need for us to be globally minded and to be thinking of all of our populations, and hope we'll come out of this being much more connected and thinking more globally. So that's a huge opportunity for us. I've heard so much uplifting today, and you know, I think of our industry as being incredibly resilient. What we're hearing from our leaders across the US is their teams have never worked harder or done better work. And to me, that's just speaks so much about the talent that wants to be in the public relations industry. You know, our leaders are worried about parents who are homeschooling young children and doing their more than full-time jobs. They won't ask for any special concession because they want to be seen as a team player. And I think, you know, one of the things we all need to do is remind all of the folks we work with that it is a marathon, not a sprint. And I know that's a terrible cliche, but we are going to be in this for a while, unfortunately. We're also hearing that other disciplines have been cut off by their clients, but public relations was very much in play. Relationships maintained, work was very intense. It was crisis management for the first month, and now we're definitely moving into change management. I think that's an amazing opportunity for the industry. And I think just staying focused on our opportunity to help solve the world's biggest problems. You know, we've talked through some of the opportunities that public relations can get behind on this call, but I think just to see that as our purpose and think of the different things we can do we do have a big opportunity to show our profession in the best light through this. And I guess, you know, thinking about some of those things that maybe we haven't fully embraced, like measurement, and not just at the end, but really paying attention through the, I mean, we have an amazing opportunity to tweak our work along the way. So if you can find any time in the cracks during this very busy time to really adopt measurement protocols, let's work together and standardize. Let's make sure that we are promoting a culture of continuous learning and getting our teams reading more, listening more, thinking more. That's only going to help our industry. And I did see a note in the chat box about the need for our industry to really understand the business of the clients we serve. And that's such a great message for young people right now. And I think for young people in our profession, wow, you have an incredible opportunity, because the rock stars will be seen in moments like this. So I think to think of every day as a moment of truth is awesome. And I have so much confidence in the leaders across our industry, listening to all of you and thinking about the leaders that I have the privilege of working with every day. I mean, I think our leadership will show very well through this crisis, and we'll quickly get back to growth. I think our businesses will be different. And if you don't take the opportunity to make your business different, you are missing a big opportunity. But I think we'll get back to growing, and just encourage everyone to protect as much talent as they can. We want everyone engaged in our industry, because I think we will go back to growth and fighting for talent. But for now, let's all work together. I love the sense of community and sharing that I'm seeing everywhere, and more opportunities like this are going to help everybody get through this successfully. So thank you, Maxim. I appreciate it very much.
Kim, thank you very much. Thank you really for your fast reaction, for the good words, for your optimism. And also thanks to PR Council to be such a dedicated ECO member. And we've been having such a great partnership with David, of course, and then Aaron, and now with you, with Barbara. We really appreciate the partnership with PR Council, and hope to see you very soon in person. There is a surprise at the very end of our meeting, and the surprise is following, because all we are new in Zoom. You know that Zoom, February 1st, they had 10 million users. Now they have 220 million users. So they had such a growth that all of us, we were trying to manage a good work, and how to cope with software. I have a doubt that David's presentation, first 15 minutes, were not recorded for one or another reason. And also David, for one or another reason, also didn't manage to present the slides on the screen. I asked David Gallagher to repeat his presentation just for the sake of the recording and the sake of the bytes, which we would like to take from our great meeting today. So David agreed kindly. And at the end of our meeting, by the way, I open a big bracket to say happy Passover to the one who celebrated this week. Happy Easter and Good Friday to the one who will celebrate this weekend. Happy Easter to the ones who will celebrate next weekend, the Orthodox, Eastern Orthodox. And we will try to repeat this beautiful discussion in 1 or 2 months. The World Communications Forum Association will create a committee, most probably with the huge involvement of Cesare Valli, who suggested to make this manifesto from our meeting. And at the end of our meeting today, before we say each other happy weekend, by the way, we have 81 listeners online out of 100, which is more than 80% stayed until the end. Huge success. David, do you hear me?
I hear you. Yep. Oh, I'm happy to do it again.
David, thank you very much. Apologize. And also you will have an opportunity to share your slides, which is the visual part of your excellent presentation. You have the floor, my friend.
I'm guessing everybody doesn't need to stay around unless they really want to see the slides. So, as Maxim already said, hi, happy Passover, hi, happy Easter, whether you celebrate it this weekend or the next weekend, and definitely happy Friday. Max, when you asked me to make these comments, I was excited. I wanted to have an opportunity to connect with you and all the wonderful people that took some time out of their Friday to engage. So thank you for that. I was also anxious because I realized there wasn't much I didn't think there's much I could add to the conversation. So much has already been said or written or expressed about this, including myself. I think I mentioned I've probably written 50 to 60,000 words on this already. And I don't know what I could say that would add to what you have already heard, especially knowing how closely you're all paying attention to this topic. I also didn't want to use cliches or repeat obvious points or move into territory that I think we're all very well aware of. This is unprecedented and uncertain. And finally, I wanted to get the right balance between optimism and being a little bit afraid. There are moments where I feel pretty happy about where things are going and pretty confident that we've got the right infrastructure and resilience. There are other times when I'm less confident, maybe not in our business or our industry, but in myself. And so I waver back and forth between feeling naive or and overly optimistic or overly negative. And then I had to ask the question, which crisis are we facing right now? There's obviously a public health crisis going on. Yesterday, I read that every 98 seconds, someone in the UK, where I'm speaking to you from, has died from the coronavirus. There are ambulances and helicopters over my house constantly. So it's hard to get away from the reality of this crisis. There are at least 60 people from Omnicom, where I work, who have been affected by this. And I have some personal friends who've lost partners or family members. So this is a real public health crisis. And it's obvious. Underneath the obvious crisis are a bunch of hidden crises. There's a crisis in domestic violence happening right now, and child abuse happening right now, and substance abuse happening right now, in how adult caregivers give care to people who are older and facing other issues. All these things are happening right now, and they're not necessarily a crisis we're going to talk about, but they're very real. And that throws a light on another crisis, and that's in the charitable sector, the NGO sector. Two charities that I am connected to, Mothers to Mothers, which operates in Southern Africa and connects mothers with HIV to helping other mothers prevent HIV spread, and then Shelter, which is a homeless shelter, a charity in the UK. They're not in crisis, but they could be soon, because they are under such pressure to deliver more services to more people with possibly less funding, almost certainly less funding than is required for the task. And that shines a light on the next crisis, which has begun already. I think we've seen in France, which has gone into recession, and that's the financial crisis. And I'm trying to be quick to say, I'm not an economist. I don't know when we will come out of this. I don't know whether it'll be a hockey stick shaped curve or a slow gradual climb out or something else. But we're in the worst economic emergency we've had in 100 years at least. And then it's not hard to look about future crises. Those are probably taking form right now, whether you call it a crisis in democracy or a crisis in confidence or a crisis in international relations. The seeds have been sown for problems we're going to have to deal with probably for the next decade. And one illustration of that, the power that's required to tackle a pandemic or to tackle a recession are enormous. And it's not going to be easy for those in power to surrender those easily. And I think we'll see those consequences, the ramifications of that for some time. So as a result, I do not want to give prescriptions. I don't have remedies for everything that's facing us. And I don't want to make predictions, because I don't have the kind of data that I think you need to have predictions that will work. So what I thought I might do instead is offer a few possibilities. And by these, I mean opportunities for us to reconsider where we fit as a business, as an industry, what our roles are in that business or industry, and how we might do things a little differently given the opportunity. And I borrowed heavily from the thoughts of others. And if you agree with me, you agree with me. If you disagree, you're disagreeing with them. But actually, what I've tried to do is take the experience of others and offer my own perspectives. And I started with a guy that you all know, Paul Holmes, who is both an analyst and an occasional critic, but a friend to the industry. And the first thing he talked about was the opportunity, the possibility of restoring trust in journalism. Now, he wants to do this at a societal level. He wants people at large to regain their faith in active, objective, fact-based journalism, which I do too. But I would take that a step further and say that we in our business as media advisors have been asleep at the wheel. We let the spread of fake news and disinformation and misinformation spread like a virus in ways that we shouldn't have, and that was a mistake. Francis and I talked about having a symposium at some point this year, PRCA and ECO, to address this, and I think that's still very much our plan. Obviously, it's taken a backseat to other priorities, but I do think this is something that we need to focus on as an industry. Related to that is valuing expert knowledge. I've made this joke before, and I've seen it on Twitter, but every disaster movie in the world starts with an arrogant politician ignoring a scientist or some expert talking about an impending disaster. And without fail, we end up in a earth that's either on fire or underwater or in a barren landscape. And I just can't help but think, welcome to 2020. This is where we are right now. And I feel like we too have some responsibility here. We are the profession that developed the idea of experts, of people who know what they're talking about, being engaged as spokespeople to help break down complicated, scary concepts and convey them to the public. And we've watched these experts be relegated to elitist or eggheads or somehow irrelevant. And I think we bear some responsibility for that. I think we've fallen in love with influence over expertise. And there's probably a balance between the two, but we need to take it as our own responsibility to re-engage and restore value to expertise. A third idea, and again, I'm taking this lead from Paul, is making capitalism better. And I know there's going to be some eye rolls about this because we talked about this in 2007, 2008, after that failure, when so much money had to be infused back into business to make capitalism work again. And we all made a lot of promises about how we would make it more sustainable, more inclusive, more longer term, less focused on short-term returns. And then we very quickly slid back into our old bad habits. And it wasn't really until late last year with the Business Roundtable, it's mostly a collection of American businesses, tried to redefine what it means to be a company, what it means to be a corporation. And they said that in addition to shareholders, we needed to think about a wider stakeholder community. And we need to think about what it means for employees, for the supply chain, for the local communities in which we operate. And that was a great step in the right direction. I hope now that many of our governments have given enormous sums to business, that we'll take our stewardship of that money really, we'll make a huge effort to take that seriously. I have some doubts. I've just seen us repeat our bad habits in the past, but maybe this is serious enough. Maybe we don't have a choice. Maybe we'll take that more seriously. A fourth possibility for us, and you see so many examples of this, are companies and brands demonstrating true purpose. They're showing that they have a reason to exist, not just saying that they have a reason to exist. And I think this is something that appeals to us as advisors, and hopefully to the companies that we're and agencies and consultancies that we're serving. We see this as a moment to talk the talk, to do what we say we're going to do, not just say what we're going to do. I have a colleague at Omnicom, John O'Brien, who has written a book. You can see that on the power of purpose, who is as well versed in the power of purpose as anybody I know. And he says that now is the moment for companies, brands, and institutions of all kinds to connect with communities through truthful, authentic human acts. And I couldn't agree with him more. This is a moment for us to make purpose work, but in reality with authenticity. Just by the way, he and I just launched a new magazine, a digital magazine from Omnicom called The One. I will supply a link to that, but you can Google it. The 100 Agency is the best way to find it. But this has a series of stories from really thoughtful people about how to be true to purpose, especially during this trying time. A fifth possibility, I think, relates to reigniting creativity. A friend of mine from London, who since moved back to Boston, our kids grew up together here in London, but she went back to be a lecturer at Northeastern University and became a founder of a group called Creative Reframe. She is noticing the opportunities for us to use creativity to communicate maybe more personally, more authentically as we deal with this crisis. And she sees a business opportunity with that for us to reimagine our creative impulses. And she's got great examples, and some of these are obvious, like TikTok videos, sidewalk art, the Thursday night applause for health workers, as you see in this photo, the operettas in Milan. These ways of communicating, I think, convey much more feeling and meaning to people than some of the things that we've been relying on. And I'm a fan of data, but I think maybe in some ways we've fallen in love with data as the main way of communicating. And I totally get there's an interplay, and you can be creative with data, and data helps you be more creative. But I think we've lost sight of creativity at times, and I think that's a wake-up call for us. A sixth area is an expanding collaboration. And I've been honest, I was frustrated when the depths of the crisis were first clear to us. There was a lot of opportunism. There were a lot of agencies and consultancies saying their model would be the most effective to get clients through this crisis because they were small and agile, or because they were big and had a lot of cash. And I found that really frustrating and a little bit depressing. But luckily, and I know this has happened in other places, but here in the UK, the PRCA launched a new initiative, COVID-19, this is the only graphic I could find, but a resource kit of great information, materials, data, graphics, but most importantly, access to experts. There are 60 volunteers, people who are unmatched really in their knowledge and wisdom from consultancy and in-house jobs, who are giving their time to help others navigate this. And it can be an agency crisis, a management crisis, a HR crisis, but they're there to help that this industry survives this. And I cannot imagine a more clear, definite demonstration of community. And I think that's it's very welcome. I'm sure we'll get to a point where we'll go back to our old competitive ways, and there's lots of good reasons for that. But I hope we still find a way to maintain this collaborative spirit. And sorry, you can hear my dog in the background. Maintain this collaborative spirit to address some of the issues that we've had such a hard time getting a handle on. A seventh possibility, I really didn't think about till yesterday, and I had a note from a friend in the US who runs an analytics company, and I told him I was doing this talk about the crisis. And he says, it's not a crisis, it's an opportunity. It's a moment for the PR and communications industry to rise toward. And that guy is Mark Stauss. He's the CEO of Proof Analytics. And he sees this as our calling, our finest hour. He says, you can read on the screen, earned channels are surging, particularly anything rooted in science and anything rooted in credible fact. Employees say they're relying on their employers for up-to-date COVID news. This is the hour where trust and confidence matter most. And this is a guy who examines different channels of communications and runs the numbers and says, this is our moment. And I thought that was a good reminder. And finally, the last possibility, I think, is finding humility. And maybe this is a little more personal, but hopefully you'll find some relevance too. By humility, I mean acknowledging that the way you thought about yourselves, the way I thought about myself, is changing. I have definitely found things in dealing with this crisis that I haven't liked about myself. It's not the way I thought I would deal with this. I hopefully found a few strengths too, but overall, I have to accept the fact that the assumptions I had about myself, my business, and our place in the world may not be as valid tomorrow as they were yesterday. And with that humility, I think comes great opportunity. This point was brought home to me with the podcast from a friend here in London. He's a sustainability expert, Ed Gillespie, who started an entirely new series of commentary on how society is dealing with these changes, knowing that they're happening really fast. So it's too early, really, for us to know what's happening. But by the time we get a fix on that, it's probably too late to change the narrative. So that podcast, sorry, that's me being humble. That podcast is called The Great Humbling, which I think is really well named, because I think this is a humbling moment for all of us in any business that we're in. And it stems from a quote from Milton Friedman, that only crisis, real or perceived, produces real change. And when that crisis comes around, the actions that are taken depends on the ideas that are laying around. And so what he does in this podcast with his co-producer is look at the stories that are emerging right now from government, from business, from civil society, from academia. He says, these are the tools that people are going to pick up and rebuild the next thing that's coming. So you need to be aware of them, and you need to help influence them, and you certainly need to prepare for what they might look like. And I think that too is very humbling. I don't know what comes next. I think there are many of us who want to get back to business as usual and do what we used to do before, with this as something in our rearview mirror. There are others of us who say the genie's out of the bottle. We know now we can take care of the homeless. We can focus our attention on the things that are important. We can celebrate healthcare workers like we once celebrated athletes. I don't know that we have to choose between all this, but I think we need to look at these new possibilities of where our time and attention and energy is focused. I think we need to do that with a sense of humility. So I'd encourage you to take a listen to that podcast. And finally, I would look to something I read in the FT last week. Arundhati Roy wrote that the pandemic is a portal, and we can walk through it with our dead ideas, or we can walk lightly and imagine another world. And I don't know what your dead ideas are. I'm starting to take inventory of what mine are, about myself, about our business, about our industry. And I hopefully can put some of those to the side and look towards a future where I can imagine another world. So I think what I would leave you with is let's walk lightly. Let's walk lightly together, and let's imagine a new world together. So really appreciate this time to engage with all of you. I'm very happy to keep up the conversation. My best channel is Twitter, but happy to go to other channels as well. So thanks very much.
David, thank you very much indeed. Can you please stop the sharing? Just we can see each other. Yes. So everyone, thank you. I'm closing the first online communication summit, which was organized by the World Communications Forum Association. Again, we've been doing this in Davos, Switzerland for the past 11 years. We did one in Geneva last year, which was the latest one. And now we are doing this on Zoom. Nobody knows how it will continue. For sure, we will make another one on Zoom, most probably in the near future. But thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, David. Thank you, Francis. Thank you, Johna. All of us, thank you. Thanks to my executive committee. Thank you, Jana, Jon-Hans. Thank you, Sori. Thank you, Ganesh. Thank you, Sabina. All of us, we are a great power, and we'll meet soon again. Thank you, and have a good weekend, and happy holidays to all of you.